In episode 1, we examined the material consciousness, which included our thoughts, feelings, psyche, our ego, our personality, character, memory, and everything that contributes to our conscious experience. If you haven't seen episode 1, you might watch it before this video, episode 2, to get some background on the material side of our consciousness. In today's episode, we will be exploring Billy's explanation of the spiritual consciousness. This is the spiritual counterpart to the material consciousness. Hi, and welcome to episode 2 on consciousness. In this video, we will be looking at the spiritual consciousness, the counterpart of the material consciousness. But before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about some terms Billy has used in the past in his writings that have recently changed. And by recently, I mean 2019 and 2020. When Billy started writing his books in 1975, he knew with foresight that the material he would be presenting is beyond our capability of understanding. In other words, we would not be able to comprehend the lessons, or could even have misunderstandings because we lack the appropriate fundamental background in the teachings of creation. Because of this, Billy used earthly words and terms to describe ideas that would otherwise not be understandable. Over the years, as we became more knowledgeable in the teachings and more accustomed to his writing style, Billy started using more advanced words and terms that would be understandable to us, as well as be more accurate to the ideas and subjects he was writing about. A case in point is the term spirit and spiritual teaching. In the 745th Contact Report from July 19, 2020, Billy said he will stop using the term spirit, which has been used since ancient times, and start using the more correct term creation energy. And for the term spiritual teaching, he will start using creation teaching. These word changes, along with others, represent a growth in our understanding rather than a change in the original meaning. Billy knew back then that if he used the term creation energy, we wouldn't have any idea what that meant, so he used the term spirit, which, because of its common use, it conveys a certain understanding for most people. So for this video, we will be using the updated terms. Our spiritual consciousness is made up of pure creation energy. It's our spirit. It's creation energy. And this creation energy doesn't think like the material consciousness because it doesn't have a thinking center with the various forms of consciousness like the material side. In addition, the creation energy does not know or experience feelings like the material consciousness. Thoughts and feelings are exclusive to the material side of our consciousness. This is an important concept because sometimes you might hear people say that they are thinking with their spirit or spiritual consciousness or feeling with their spiritual side. This isn't possible. Thinking and feeling only take place in the material side of life, in our material consciousness. The creation energy works in a completely different way. It works with impulses and Empfindung. Empfindung is a German word, and unfortunately, this is a word that doesn't have an accurate English translation. If you look up the word Empfindung, it's going to say sensations or feelings or something along those lines. However, Empfindung means fine spiritual perception. Because there is no single English word to accurately capture the meaning behind the word Empfindung, we're just going to use the German word in this video. So, Empfindung means fine spiritual perception.
The human consciousness is made up of two distinct parts that constitute the whole: the material consciousness and the spiritual consciousness. In this video, we will be exploring the spiritual consciousness, which is now called the creation energy. The creation energy block contains within it the creation energy consciousness. the creation energy subconsciousness, and the creation energy central consciousness. The creation energy consciousness works with impulses. Impulses could be considered the creation energy counterpart to thinking in the material consciousness. In addition to impulses, the creation energy consciousness also contains the Empfindung. The Empfindung manages and works with fine spiritual perception.
There are as many variations of Empfindung in the creation energy as there are feelings in the material consciousness. So, if you can imagine how many different forms and variations of feelings exist, and they're uncountable, this would be how many different forms and variations of Empfindung, or fine spiritual perceptions, exist in the creation energy consciousness. And just like feelings play an important role in our lives by enriching our experiences, Empfindung, or fine spiritual perceptions, play an important role in the processes and evolution of the creation energy consciousness.
The creation energy consciousness doesn't have a psyche like the material consciousness. The creation energy consciousness has what's called a Gemut. Gemut is a non-translatable German word. There is no English word for it, so we'll just use the German word Gemut. The Gemut is the creation energy counterpart to the psyche in the material consciousness. The Gemut manages and works with creation energy, consciousness-based impulses and Empfindung within itself in a constant, equalized form. This means that the negative and the positive are continuously equalized into a neutral positive state, which the Gemut absorbs and works with. The Gemut and the entire creation energy consciousness only operate in a harmoniously equalized state. Because there are no thoughts and feelings, there are no emotional states or feeling states in the creation energy consciousness.
The evolutionary process that works in the Gemut is called Empfinden. This is another non-translatable German word which means fine spiritual perceiving. For us English speakers, it's easy to confuse Empfinden and Empfindung because they sound similar. Empfinden means fine spiritual perceiving, and Empfindung means fine spiritual perception. There's an important difference between perceiving and perception. To perceive means to become aware of through the senses or through thinking or to understand. This is the process that takes place in the Gemut. This is the German word Empfinden. Perception means identification, organization, and the interpretation of sensory information. This is the work of the Empfindung in the creation energy consciousness.
Empfinden is a pure creation energy process that takes place in the Gemut. This fine spiritual perceiving, the becoming aware of, takes place exclusively in the Gemut. The Gemut can receive Empfindung, or fine spiritual perceptions, from the Empfindung center. The Gemut also receives impulses from the impulse center, and the Gemut can also receive impulses from the psyche via the subconsciousness and central consciousness.
The Gemut has no direct connection to our material bodies, and therefore is unaffected by positive or negative thoughts. The Gemut only works with impulses and Empfindung. The Gemut can receive impulses from the psyche, but only impulses that are neutrally positively balanced. This means it's important to maintain a healthy and balanced psyche so that we have the possibility of receiving and sending impulses between the psyche and the Gemut.
In addition to the Gemut, the creation energy consciousness also contains the evolution consciousness, which is analogous to the I consciousness or ego of the material realm. Also part of the creation energy consciousness is the individuality consciousness, which is analogous to the personality on the material side. Finally, there is the spiritual wisdom, which is a storage bank or memory of the essence or highest attainment of wisdom in life's lessons. This contains the essence or highest wisdom of all previous lives.
It's important to understand that this diagram and the processes shown are only a very rough analogy. Because our spiritual consciousness consists of creation energy, there is no way to explain, diagram, or illustrate these things, because these processes take place in a totally different realm of existence that is not explainable or even understandable. These diagrams and explanations are only meant to provide a very simple idea to grasp concerning our creation energy consciousness. In his books, Billy talks about a few different types of material or matter. There is fine material, semi-fine material, and coarse material. Coarse material is normal matter, the stuff we can see and touch. All of the things in our everyday life are coarse material. Fine material is of a different nature. It can't be touched, seen, measured, or registered on any device we can currently build with earthly technology. Semi-fine material is the state between coarse material and fine material. It has some properties of both fine material and coarse material. The creation energy consciousness is made up of fine material, and because of this, it can't be harmed or damaged by drugs, poisons, accidents, or anything in the coarse material world. The creation energy consciousness and everything made of fine material is completely invisible. Also, the physical size of our creation energy consciousness is extremely small, about the size of the tip of a needle.
The spiritual consciousness is located in the human brain between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, in an area called the midbrain, which is highlighted here in green. Within the midbrain, there is a small structure called the superior colliculus. This is the physical location of the spiritual consciousness during our lifetime.
Our creation energy consciousness conducts itself in a totally neutral way and does not interfere at all in the material consciousness. The creation energy consciousness only stands in observation, ready to learn, accept, and work through impulses from the material consciousness. Another way to look at it is the material consciousness, our bodies, our senses, and our life, is a collection of experiences that enables the creation energy consciousness to learn and evolve. This is a very basic understanding of the creation energy consciousness. So, if we now join the concepts from episode 1 and this episode, episode 2, this then is a simplified analogy of our consciousness functions.
On the left is the material consciousness, and on the right is the creation energy consciousness. This is a good time to introduce the central consciousness, which acts as an intermediary between the material consciousness and the creation energy consciousness. The central consciousness is actually one block within itself and is half material and half spiritual in nature. The central consciousness is responsible for several different types of communication or forwarding of impulses between the material consciousness and the creation energy consciousness. Empfindung, or fine spiritual-based perceptions, can move from the psyche to the Gemut as impulses. The Gemut can send already processed or worked through neutral positive impulses to the psyche. The use of spiritual energy also travels this path.
Schwingungen is a German word that means swinging waves. And again, if you look up the word, it will translate as vibration or oscillation, and this just isn't accurate. So the German Schwingungen means swinging waves.
Harmonious swinging waves can go from the Gemut to the psyche to a degree determined by the state of the psyche. The healthier, more balanced, and more harmonious our psyches are, the greater amount of these swinging waves can be received.
These Schwingungen, or swinging waves from the Gemut, can influence and strengthen our psyche. However, if our psyches are impaired by our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then these swinging waves are weakened or even completely blocked from absorption.
This is a simplified diagram of the human consciousness showing the different parts in both the material and creation energy sides, how our thoughts, feelings, and our psyche affect our lives, and how the creation energy consciousness provides subtle impulses to assist us on life's path of discovery, learning, knowledge, and wisdom.
As we have seen, the brain isn't consciousness. Consciousness is simply a function of the brain. Our spirit, which we now call the creation energy consciousness, is not the same as the material consciousness. The creation energy consciousness is what gives rise to the material consciousness. I hope you enjoyed this two-part series on human consciousness. Feel free to leave a question or comment below, and we'll see you on the next video.